Well, there we go. Good morning, guys. Good morning, Steve. I'm not sure about the countdown, why that was, because I didn't have a countdown screen on. I just had the please stand by. Though that could have been on the other computer when as I connect to YouTube. So. But Steve, Alex, good morning. Super Dave, good morning. I know this was impromptu video. Is my mic on? That looks on. How's my levels, guys? Do I sound all right? So what I'm doing today, and I'm completely messing around. I got a third camera attached, so I'm playing with that, just making sure that it looks okay. I have a visit with the guys at Panfish Nation on Thursday the 23rd. I'm going to be joining them on their podcast, so I'm kind of excited about that. So I did add a third camera, so when I'm looking at the screen interacting with Lyle and Mark, it looks like I'm looking at them. So just messing around a little bit with some of the equipment. The other thing we have going on is I'm building a website to, be able to sell jigs online. I've had a lot of requests for that. I do mail order. If people want to order from me, they can go into the About section on my channel and get my email address. But I'm just working through how much can I put on the website itself and make it viable. Have enough on there to cover the monthly subscription and the maintenance and the things that I do to add and update things. So this morning I'm just preparing different jigs that I'm going to be taking pictures of to add to that, and I just thought I would turn on the cameras. I haven't done a live thing in a while, and just thought I'd turn everything on. So if I switch to the vise, and we'll turn my face on. So I'll primarily be using the two cameras that I normally do. Now the first thing I have to do is I'm adding stinger hooks to a couple of these just for the photos. And for that website to begin with, I am just going to concentrate on the walleye jigs, the Barumba, the flats, and just the basic ball. And then once that's up and running, then I can go in anytime I want, and I can add the ice jigs, the smaller micro stuff, the hackle jigs, crappie jigs. The herring streamers that I've been messing with, and I'm really looking forward to. We've had some warm days, so it feels like springtime's coming, even though this morning we woke up and it was 18 degrees. I really want to fool around with that walleye rig. I mentioned in an older video about fishing a streamer here locally. I learned it as a kid. Locally we call it a Susquehanna streamer. My dad used to talk about it, is how he would fish the Shenango and Susquehanna rivers as a kid. And it was just a big, ugly bucktail attractor. Morning Fire Tiger. And basically they would weight the put a split shot on the line about 12 inches up from the streamer, and then just jig the streamer sideways, cast it out from shore, and jig it sideways. And they'd catch bass and walleye and pike here in the Shenango and Susquehanna rivers. So I fished that way as a kid, but going down a rabbit hole, looking at Wolf River rigs or Wisconsin rigs, they go by a few different names, but it's that walleye streamer. They'll have 2 or 3 streamers on the line with a pencil weight, and they're slowly pulling them through the current. There's also a couple guys online that I really like watching that fish from shore with the same type of rig. So just for something fun to try, that was something that I want to do this spring, just to goof around, and just do something different. So I will be tying up more of those streamers once I'm playing with figuring out a happy medium, something that to me represents a jig, the type of profile and size and shape, but also following the example of those guys in Wisconsin and how their streamers are. I'm also trying to figure out, I'm just putting stingers on these right now. I'm also trying to figure out why they use the hooks they use. A lot of the guys use a really short shank hook where I suspect they're copying the saltwater streamer guys, using that type of hook, but I'm not sure. So all the ones that I've done have been on a 3 or 4x long streamer hook, more of a traditional streamer hook, but I also do a couple on those smaller hooks, smaller shanked hooks that I have ordered and are coming, just to see, why choose one over the other. I would think mostly if you're fishing for something that attacks the bait from the head, the shorter hook would be fine. But I'm not sure. And I'm going to play around with it and see what I can learn. Look through a lot of my books. Can't find anything written on it at all, really. But most of my books are trout fishing and tandem streamers and trolling streamers. So I did find a baits book. I have a couple versions. One from 1966, and then the same book, just more modern. It's got a different title, but it's basically a lot of the same information. And my version was published in 70, early 70s, I think it was. Originally, the first printing on that book was in the 50s, but there is a chapter on weighting streamers, and they were making jigs. Where they were placing the weight on the streamer hook, it was a long shank jig. So I want to read up a little bit more and try to gather the information on that. You know, just it changes. I've noticed my older copy, it has the same information, but it's slightly different. The newer version, he expanded on it. And so I want to try to figure out, try to decipher what the actual facts were, or what information had changed over time and why. And again, just trying doing that sleuth type work and reading the historical type information and trying to figure out what's fact. But an interesting thing with that is Vela, in his one of his streamer books, mentions baits, and they actually disagree on who created the bucktail streamer, which they both kind of credit to being fished here, upstate New York, in the Rome, New York area. So that's also another area that I want to go through and look to see whose information is more accurate, or why the information had changed, why Bates' information is different than Vela's. So it's fun and interesting for me to go through all that stuff. And I'm just looking real quick here at the screen. All right, let me see if I can. Perfect. So, like I said, right now, I'm just adding stingers to a few of these heads. And I'm going to be using these just to take pictures to add to the website. The orange thread I'm using, you can use any color thread for this. It's just a size A rod wrapping thread. This happens to be Good Rod. I use the orange only because I had ordered I don't know, 2 boxes, so that would have been 24 spools of thread, and then I had apparently doubled that order. So I have an awful lot of orange size A thread that I don't really use. You know what? I do use the orange thread on like a brown and orange bucktail, but for the most part it doesn't get much use. So I like to use it adding the stinger hooks just to use it up. So, but red would be a great color to use because it offers a little bit extra color, you know, that red flashing from underneath the hair as you're working the jig, or black, or you know, a color that's the same as the hair would be just fine. I could also go in and add a tinsel, just like a streamer body, and that would look okay too, with a black thread with the barber pole of the silver. So I'm going to do one more stinger, and then I have a few heads here that I'm just going to put hair on. Typically with this thread that I'm adding the stinger with, once I do a dozen or so, I take the my head cement, my lacquer-based head cement, and I thin it down just a little extra, and put a light coat over the threads, just to help with the durability. You could catch a bunch of fish on these just on the stinger. They can thrash around, and the lacquer is just mainly to kind of protect it from the teeth, you know, getting raked and nicked by the teeth. Not really, it doesn't really help it anymore to keep it attached to the shank. The line that is attaching the two hooks is just a 30-pound Berkley big game. And I like the monofilament if you're catching a lot of fish, only because it doesn't distort as much as the Surflon, which is another good choice to use for this connector. But if it gets kinked real tight, you know, if there's a tight bend in it, it's almost impossible to kind of stretch back out or bend correctly. So I do prefer the 30-pound mono. So let's see. I'm going to switch my thread here. So I'm just going to my size A. This is Pac Bay size A rod wrapping thread, and these heads are right now the 5/8 Barumba. And I'm going to do that color and that color and this color. Yeah, Steve, I'm looking forward to going through those books and really trying to determine first of all where Bates got his information and why he would think that. And of course, he's the author from an earlier time. And then maybe trying to decide or find out what changed his mind, or first where did he get the information. So the fellow that he, and I don't recall the names right now off the top of my head, but the guy in Rome, New York, where he got that name from. And then where Vela got his name from is the person who invented, so to speak, or the first to use or tie the hair wing in Rome, New York. But then also, how did it change? Because I recall somewhere writing a book from Bates where his information changed as well. So trying to figure out, you know, where they got their information from. A lot of times I think, and just like when you talk to people present day, like if we traveled somewhere and we're fishing and went to the local bait shop, you might talk to somebody who says that, you know, the local tyer invented, you know, the black bucktail jig because they were the first to tie it in that area, or they were the first to, or the only one that those fishermen had met in that area that tied it, and they've never traveled anywhere else. But in reality, you know, a black bucktail jig could have been invented down the road. Steve, I'll have to dig out those names. The first book that I noticed Bates talking about Rome, and who he listed, the name that he listed as the inventor of the hair wing was, I think it's called Bucktails and Hair Wings, the Big Fish Flies. My version of the book was published in the early 70s, though the first printing of that was in the 50s. And then the other book I have from Bates, I think it's just called Streamers or Bucktails. Oh, let me grab them real quick. I have them both right there. All right, so the first, let's switch over just briefly. So the first book, and like I said, my version was published (1979). It was first published in 1950, second publishing in 1966. This copy is 1979. Joseph Bates Jr. is the author. Streamers and Bucktails, the Big Fish Flies. This is a really cool book. I've had this a long time, since I was a kid. And like I mentioned before, it's like sometimes I've had these for so long, but I flip through them and I always learn something different. So what caught my eye in this one was the chapter on streamer jigs and other weighty suggestions. And of course you can't really see the illustration much on this, but it shows where Bates worked out with another fisherman, different head types, a dowel head, a bullet head, a shot head. They used sheet lead as well as split shot weights like that to try different things, and we're turning those hair wing streamers into jigs, which was super cool. The other book I mentioned, and this one's a little bit older, Streamer Fly Tying and Fishing, also by Bates. And this copy that I've had, also I've had this copy almost as long as the other book. My copy was printed in 1966, and the first printing was 1950. So, just like I mentioned, I kind of first noticed it in a lot of the fly tying books. Let me switch. Hold on. Bear with me. Just making sure which camera I'm looking at. What I noticed in a lot of the fly tying books is with Rube Cross. His books were published by different publishers, had different titles, maybe a little bit different extra pages, or a little bit different size of the binding, so to the book itself. But it was the exact same information. I think it's kind of the same with Bates as well. Both of these books have very similar information. The chapters might be named differently, but as you read through it, a portion of one chapter is almost identical, and maybe he expands on something, a different thread in the older book, or goes the other direction as things get updated in the newer book. So I guess what I'm getting at is sometimes it feels like you're getting ripped off. when you're reading some of these books, because you think that you're buying a brand new book with all new information, and it's not. It's some of the same old stuff. If you're lucky, the old stuff was updated and expanded on. But interesting nonetheless. Let's go back here. Turn my face back on. So, you know, when do I get time to do all this? I have no idea. Just like with starting the website, nothing like starting a project when you have, you know, 3 or 4 different pots on the fire. So in the vise, this is a plain black bucktail jig. I'm going to finish this off just like normal. And I'm not adding head cement on any of these right now. Everything that I'm tying, what I will do is add the cement after. And the idea is for the technical difficulty. My microphone just dove off the table. Just to make sure that my wireless mic didn't run out of batteries, I connected it with the cable, and the cable just had some tension on it, so pulled itself over. What were we talking about? We were talking about so the website and the pictures that I'm taking. So, of course, for each of the jig styles, you can get it plain. So we just tied a very plain bucktail, black bucktail. There will be choices if you wanted to add a stinger hook to that bucktail, but the picture for the stinger hook will, I think, just be the plain head. And just to show how that's attached, eventually I'll probably have an actual finished, you know, a brown or black bucktail with the stinger, with the tinsel, anything that I can add. So, well, I wanted to tie a brown one, but I do not have brown hair on my table. So let's tie a black and an olive. So we'll tie an olive. This is a 1/2 Barumba. Pardon me. Morning, Alex. So this is a 1/2 Barumba. Again with the red size A thread. And I have the solid olive. So right now I'm going to do the olive and fluorescent yellow we needed for the photos. Didn't notice what time we started. The timer on the YouTube says 45 minutes, but I know that it took me quite some time to get turned on, only because I was messing with cameras. And I'm going to check the that place card, you know, that said please stand by and had the corny little music. just to see if the loop is timed actually. Marzulu caddis for the Mohawk River. You know, I've never fished the Mohawk River. This jig is just an olive and a fluorescent yellow. It's a plain yellow. Let's go with this one. We have a fair amount of people watching that are longtime viewers. And in regard to the website, I do have the ability to add, I don't know if you want to call it a membership area or a subscriber area. If I had something like that, what are the type of things would you be interested in finding in that? You know, I think there's old standbys that a lot of people have when they have their own website is, you know, private videos, or you see the videos before they are uploaded onto YouTube. One thing that I actually am another project that I'm thinking about, since talking to Lyle at Panfish Nation, the setup that they use for their podcast, I think would be a great way to do some live tying. Not like this where it's show and tell, but something similar. As a member of the Catskill Fly Tyers Guild before COVID, I admit that I haven't updated my membership since that, but now that we're kind of past the whole social distancing thing, I am looking forward to this spring, the rendezvous at the Catskill Fly Tying Museum. But what we used to do, guild members, we'd get together once a month, and we'd sit around a table and tie. Sometimes you're learning something, sometimes somebody's tying something new and fancy, and kind of a show and tell thing, and just teaching a pattern. But a lot of times it was just us sitting around tying whatever we wanted and having a laugh. We would also tie for organizations like Wounded Warrior, that type of thing, where we would tie pretty much whatever we wanted to that evening, but everything that we tied during our session we'd throw in the pile for the donation. So offering something like that on the website, I think, would be really neat, and something that I would really like to maybe get into again, maybe doing like a round table. So let me know your thoughts on that, or if you have any other ideas for a special area on the website. Caddisfly is always probably the first thing I use wherever I go. That's for sure. crappie jigs for sure. Can do that. Always interested in doing more ties, trying out different things, and to be honest, I wanted to put a camera or two over my fly tying bench and sit down and tying proper flies, you know, an actual Catskill style dry, maybe proper streamer, more than what I've done here. And tie to fish videos. To be honest, I'm hoping to do that with, I'm going to try it with the springtime, trying that walleye rig, because there's a couple flies that I really think are cool, that I plan on. Let me finish this jig before I take it out of the vise. But I plan on taking the camera with me when I try the streamer rig, and I'm going to try it my old-fashioned way, and I'm going to try it the new way that I want to learn, and actually get some video of me catching fish. So might hear a little bit of noise in the background. I think the rest of the house is starting to wake up. I think I heard the dogs come down the stairs. Hey Dave, how you doing? I missed when you signed on. So I wouldn't mind doing videos that I don't put on YouTube. Maybe only available to members or subscribers. That would be totally fine. Other websites, things I've seen, an idea would be a jig of the month. That would maybe be some weird pay type subscription, you know, to cover postage. Jig swaps, that's another thing I've done with a bunch of different sites over the years. Tying forums that they're still up and running, but they don't have the membership like they used to. But the jig swaps were always fun. There we go. Plain black bucktail, 1/2 Barumba. So this is a streamer that I was just messing around with material. I wanted to see how. Let me turn my face off so you get a good view of this. I wanted to see. I was just playing with the material, so I posted pictures of a few streamers recently using the craft fur, and I might. Oh, there it is. So on this streamer, we have a gold tinsel yarn that I've used before for the body. This underwing, which I tied in as a tail, and then 2 center wings, I guess you would call it, and then the last wing being right underneath this dun color. That is Hairline Ice Fur Polar Bear in the cream, which is a really neat material. I actually have some polar bear that I've picked up at a couple fly shops up in Canada, and it's pretty darn similar, I have to admit. And then this top wing is the Hairline Extra Select Craft Fur, and that's in the medium dun. But I thought this streamer was really interesting, and I like the way the body remains fairly sparse. But also has a little bit of bulk to it. So I suspect that this will thin down an awful lot once it gets wet. Just the nature of the craft fur. This Hairline Extra Select craft fur is really neat. To me, it was a lot like tying with marabou, if I had really long marabou fibers. So I'm really excited about this streamer in particular. And the other one that I did with the craft fur. And this is just a color combination that is one of my go-to colors for a jig. I do this blue dun with the chartreuse, and then the pearl angel hair, crystal flash, whichever material you have on hand. But again, with this craft fur. So I know this will thin down real tight as it goes through the current, but when it stops and is moved around by the current or jigging the rod just slightly, that hair is going to pulsate and really, I think, give some good action. So like I mentioned, I do this same streamer with a brown head, usually a ball head, and it's a go-to color for me in the Susquehanna River here locally. I do agree, adding absolutely where people can share pictures of their patterns. I could also go into greater detail of the patterns that we're using, actual recipes, so to speak. Alex, I think that's a fantastic idea. And I agree, there's a ton of talented tyers. A lot of people that don't go on YouTube, a lot of people that aren't involved in groups, a lot of people that don't talk about it. It's just somebody that does it as their free time, as a hobby. So yeah, those type of things, I think, absolutely. Yeah, Alex, I'm really looking forward to using the streamer. I'll probably tie up a couple jigs as well. Again, this summer, wanting to get out in the kayak with some actual video. Alex, with the fox hair, I've used that in the past. I don't know if I don't think it's on any videos. I actually, going through my file cabinet in the back right behind me here, where I save jigs and things that I've tied. I have a streamer that I used, the fox bucktail, that I thought was really good, but I had to make a really wide streamer. It was a long streamer. It's probably 5 or 6 inches long, and I thought the fox hair worked good for that. It was sparse, so it wasn't a big clump, because I thought it was slightly stiff. And then I tied it onto a jig. I think it was a half Barumba, and to me it seemed a little stiff, where I had to. I liked the fact that the fibers were natural, where the ends weren't square. They kind of tapered at the ends, but it just seemed stiff if I used what I thought would be a 50-50 clump, adding it with bucktail. But yeah, the fox hair I thought was kind of neat if on the longer streamers. That was my impression of it. The colors, absolutely. I really like the fox stuff. So, all right, let's get back to what are we doing next. I got a quarter. Now I haven't tied these all that much. They don't get a lot of requests. I do sell a fair amount of them, but I don't get a lot of requests for these. It's mostly guys that know, and they're using them in a specific location or a specific depth. So it's that Barumba head in a quarter size. And this jig, I have a couple molds. This mold is much newer, and as you can see, has a nice sharp square nose. And this is an example from the oldest mold I have of the Barumba head, and it's slightly more pointed at the end. I like them both. I keep them mixed. I don't know if people notice it much. I haven't had any complaints over the years, but it's mostly just from that second head. That mold is so old, and it just wears out. It's probably one of the first molds that we had made. Probably older than me. Before I was born, when my father first started getting into designing the jigs and doing the custom molds. Now there are jigs that are very, very similar to the Barumba head. Any of the walleye style jigs are very similar. Profile might be slightly different, but it's your typical walleye type jig. Oh, that's a good point too, Alex. How the water stains natural materials. And when I posted the recent that Blue Dun and Chartreuse streamer, I made a comment about how I used synthetic material. I try not to, or the stuff I do use, it's been around a long time, and maybe that's a fault of mine, not being more open to some of the new stuff. Scotty B, welcome. Yes, I'm trying to copy the Wolf and Fox River, those type of rigs that they use for white bass and walleye. If you're new to the conversation, we fish for streamers since I was a kid here in the Susquehanna, and what we would do is you just had a single streamer on your line. It was a big ugly bucktail and just a split shot about 12 inches connected to the line, and we would fish it exactly the way the guys are fishing in Wisconsin. So when I got down, going down a YouTube rabbit hole and watch the guys using the rigs on the Fox and Wolf River, I'm thinking, God, I could do that from shore here. And mostly what I was thinking is at our local spillway, where you lose a jig every 2 or 3 casts because of the rocks. So that's why I started doing it, or started thinking about it. So I'm really looking forward to this spring and goofing around with that. And yeah, 50 plus years, I'd believe it. That Susquehanna streamer was, my father used to fish in the Shenango and the Susquehanna rivers using that streamer that I explained, going back into this is 40s, late 30s, early 40s. So yeah, and I like fooling around with some of the old forgotten techniques. I'm just trying to up the game just a little bit, copying these guys that are using it in your neck of the woods. So awesome. So we're kind of, hopefully it's not too distracting how I got to look in different directions. And even though I have a camera right above the computer, as I'm tying, it's easier to look at this camera here for the picture-in-picture. So, Scotty, using that that walleye rig, do you tie the flies directly to the line, so you have the fly at the end and the couple, one or two, up the line, or are you adding a tag so the flies that are farther up the line have 6 or 7 inches of their own line coming off of that? I've seen both. I would think that having the flies on the main line itself, tied directly to the main line, would be no tangles. But how do you rig that? How do you tie that up? And then the descriptions I've seen of that, connecting those flies to the main line, is they're using just a regular Palomar knot. I don't know if there's any other special knots. It's not like you can, there's no books on this, right? You don't really find any of this information in books. So I'm going to tie just a few more of these. I'll do a couple with, I got to do a black with the red tinsel. And I'll do that next. And then I got to clear this area because this is where I do most of my photography, only because I got the 3 lights all set up. And this one will be the olive bucktail with the cream, if I have a tail here. So the olive, and this is off-white. It's a cream color. It kind of reminds me of root beer fizz when you pour a glass of root beer. Lots of noise upstairs. I think the dogs are getting peanut butter. Little treat. So our ice fishing season this year was hot and cold and hot and cold. It's cold again right now. And maybe we'll get ice again, but right now most of the, unless you're fishing on the really small lakes, most of the lakes are a bust. I know Oneida Lake is pretty much done. They might have a little bit of ice, but you're fishing really close to shore in some of the smaller bays. Skipjack is cut bait, yeah. And are you, Alex, are you in Tennessee? Is that right? I don't know the name of the dam. The last time we were down in Tennessee visiting my brother-in-law and his family, they took us on the Tennessee River and we fished right below a giant dam. And we were pulling out the biggest catfish I'd ever caught in my life. And there was another fish, and I don't remember what they were called. They're big red fish. So this jig, we're doing the black with the Flashabou, red Flashabou. Now this is a solid black. And I tie the Flashabou on a little bit different than if I was using Crystal Flash or Angel Hair, where after we put on this first pinch and we give it a twist, I take 5 to 8 strands. Don't have to spend a lot of time counting these out, but roughly 5 to 8. And I put the flash right down the center on top of the hook shank. And I don't have to trim this just because I was a little careful on where I cut it, so it stops right before the tips of the tail itself. But the Flashabou is right down the center. I like that. That's how I first learned how to tie it. But for the Flashabou, I think that works well because the Flashabou itself is thicker than if we were using Crystal Flash or Angel Hair. And then the way I would tie the Crystal Flash on is I would first tie on both pinches of hair, and before we finish the collar, I put a length of 4 strands of Crystal Flash down one lateral line and then down the other side. So if I don't have these in my inventory already where I can just open a package and take a picture of those, that's kind of why I'm tying these here today. Northern Alabama. Okay, so nowhere near Tennessee where I was fishing. And that was a few years ago. My niece, his daughter at the time, she was, I don't know, I think she was like 8th or 9th grade, and we just saw her recently at my daughter's wedding at the end of October, and kids grow up. She's about the same age as our youngest. So yeah, they're adults now, driving and got jobs and going to college and starting to feel old. So my brother-in-law is in Chattanooga, or just outside of Chattanooga. What's the name of it? It's got a weird name. Escapes me. He's close to Chattanooga. He's not far from Chattanooga. And we were right on the Tennessee River. I remember having to go through a lock, which was a little scary, being in a John boat when you had a great big flat deck boat filled with you know, the cargo containers. And as the lock filled up and that boat shifts a little bit, if you really want to feel small, that's a good way to do that. Just go through a lock with a great big giant ship. But we get through the lock, and then the dam was the dam and the power station, whatever they had right there, was right there. And what the guys would do is pull their boat right up to the wall along the dam, and he had his anchor rope, and he had a like a metal bar that he would slide between the crack between the two panels of concrete, put it in the crack and kind of turn it slightly so it would wedge in there, so the boat would stay right along the wall there. We didn't move too much. We did notice we did have to be careful when the water level would drop. You know, if it drops too much and you don't adjust your anchor point, soon you're hanging off the you're hanging off the wall. We saw a guy do that. That was a little scary, but he luckily his boat wasn't completely hanging. It was still slightly buoyant, so he was able to get that unwedged. But yeah, that would have been bad if the water level dropped another inch or two. His boat would have been just stuck to the wall until the water came up. So. All right, so we did the red tinsel. What else do I got to do? I do have the pearl. So we will do that black Barumba. I apologize a little bit. Some of these jigs are slightly boring. I'm really not doing anything terribly fancy. Like I said, I'm just tying what I need to take the photos for the website. And these are just, a few that I don't have pre-tied. So the other thing I will have to do with this website is, I have to manage the inventory on it. So I will have my boxes of complete dozens that I take to the bait shops. I'm going to have a separate box of the open dozens. So if I tie a dozen at a time, it'll be my website inventory. So the other thing with the website is I'm trying to consider right now the best way to go about doing it is either selling the jigs individually or selling them in groups of 3, or you buy a black bucktail, you get 3. So pricing them that way. I kind of have my feeling, I've gone to websites and bought jigs. You might be right, Alex. We might have been around Fort Lauderdale, but I'll have to give him a call and find out exactly where we were. It was so many years ago. That'll be a picture I'll add to the website. Me holding the catfish bigger than my kids. So as a customer, I've gone on websites and I do like the idea of, I just want one of those and one of these. But if you get a little bit of discount per jig, if I could save a few cents per jig, and they only come in groups of 3, so if I buy a black jig, I get 3 black jigs. but instead of $2.50 a piece, they're $2 a piece. I don't feel so bad buying them that way. So I'm just trying to decide which would be the best. I could add both, but then it makes your drop-down box when you're buying jigs almost unmanageable. To start with, I'm only doing about 5 colors. So if you go into the 5/8 Barumba, you click the black head and you get 5 different choices, colors to choose from. Well, those 5 different colors to choose from also have a stinger version, a flash version, a stinger and flash version. So if I also double that by buying one at a time or buying them in groups of 3, that doubles everything. So unless I'm missing something on this website on how to go about adding those types of drop-down boxes, I don't want to make it so unmanageable that a customer looking at it is just, there's too many choices. I'm just going to buy my one thing and go. So we'll see. I still have another 14 days to goof around with this. I'm doing these jigs today just to see how the photos look and how they get plugged in. So what I'm adding here is 4 strands of the Pearl Crystal Flash, and it's identical to the Crystal Hair CH19. I don't know if you can still find Crystal Flash. This is very, very, very old material that I've had for years. And Crystal Hair seems to be what you see mostly on websites, but it's identical. It's the exact same material, so it's possible just the name kind of evolved. I've also seen it called Angel Hair, but exact same thing. And I'm just tying it in right down the lateral line of the jig, and then I'm trimming it just before so it's just short the length of the tail. And that's the other thing too. There are styles that people prefer based on their location. Some areas and you see it online, you see different tires, they'll tie the tinsel much longer than the tail, and that's what they would prefer. I don't have an easy way to add custom things like that. I would love it if I could just put drop down box, custom flash, custom stinger, custom, and as you click each thing, it increases the price per special thing. And then an area for comments. So if somebody wanted that red flashaboo to stick out past the tips of the tail, some people like that. I was always taught not to tie it that way. And I'm convinced myself, just from walleye fishing, is that we don't want the hairs to extend to limit the amount of short strikes you get from the walleye, because those couple extra long hairs or the tinsel that's sticking out too far, my father always explained it to me, tickles the nose of the walleye, and you get those short strikes. Is that always true? I don't know, but that, the old fishermen that smell like bait, I kind of believe them. So Crystal Flash, okay, yep. So this is the stuff I'm using, Alex. Crystal Flash with a K. I'm sure I could go get some crystal hair with a C. I can get the angel hair. I could get the, what else do they call it? So yeah, it's a popular material. Been around forever. The other place I fished when I was down in Tennessee was the, and that it might be part of the Tennessee River as well. It's the river that goes right through the Cherokee National Park, and did some fly fishing down there. And beautiful river. I was in a section that looked similar to what we have here in New York State, and it just looked like a nice big open pool, and it looked fairly shallow, maybe up to my knees or so, because you could see the ripples in the river as it would go over the shallow parts, hitting the rocks and whatnot. So as I'm wading out and I start looking, and I see these giant pools that were carved out of the stone. So what looked like knee height water, you could very easily step into a car-sized hole that was over 6 feet deep. Like it was surprising to me, because here in New York State, you're walking through the river and you might have boulders, big rocks, bowling ball sized rocks that you're stepping over, but it's fairly consistent. The level from the surface to the bottom of the river doesn't change all that much, maybe a few inches. Occasionally you'll see a hole, but you're not going to dunk your head. You might get water up to your waist, but you're not going under. But yeah, that river was, and I do believe it is the Tennessee River there also. That was a learning experience. I thought I was Joe Fly Fisherman and knew everything. Well, I knew everything about the river I fish at, just not Tennessee. So I think that's going to do it for us this morning. I think I've been tying at least an hour. I got to clear my space and start taking some photos. As I get closer to the end of the 2 weeks and finishing up this website where I'll have things for sale, and I'll put some videos up that aren't on the YouTube just for people to visit the website, that's not as a subscriber or anything like that, but a reason, even if you don't want to buy anything, to come visit the website. But a couple weeks I'll get that finished up, and I'll put some more information out on YouTube or Instagram just to let people know that it's up and running. If you have the time, please join me Thursday, the 23rd. It will be 7 p.m. Central Time, so 8 p.m. Eastern, where I'm going to be on the podcast with the guys from Panfish Nation. So I'm really looking forward to talking to Lyle. I think Mark will be there as well. Not 100% sure. I know Lyle for sure, but I was pretty excited, and really was honored, I guess, when Lyle contacted me and just said, hey, would you like to be on the podcast? And we ended up chatting on the phone, doing a little FaceTime actually on the computer for about an hour or so, and just worked through some of the computer stuff to make sure that the video that you get from me is going to be as good as possible. I didn't want to do it just on my phone and just, have it propped up. I wanted the angle to be good, and we found out that I'm going to be able to at least have the camera for the vise, and then the camera that I'm going to talk into. Probably this camera over here, which is lined up with the computer screen. So it looks like I'm talking. I'm looking at the person while I'm talking to them. But I'm gonna have that ability. So not exactly sure what we're going to talk about. You know, he's going to ask me about jig tying and probably a little bit of history and how I got started. I'm sure that'll be part of the conversation. It won't be 100% panfish stuff, I'm sure. So, but I'm looking forward to it, and I hope everybody joins me. Thursday the 23rd, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. And I'm sure you could go to their website, Panfish Nation, and subscribe so you get the notification for that. So, but I think that'll do it. Grateful for everybody who stopped in today. A lot of good conversation, not just with me, but between the viewers as well, which I love that. Eventually I'm going to have to get a helper, somebody who can manage the computer and clue me in on different things, so I'm not just looking at the Vice or just reading the comments and responding. So trying to make things a little bit smoother, but I'm glad everybody enjoys what we're doing here. And like I said, that'll do it for us. Until next time, guys, keep tying and tight lines. Can't believe I didn't record.